Welcome to Mr. Night Media.
Welcome back, everyone. Halloween may be known for spooky costumes, trick-or-treating, and playful scares, but sometimes reality can be far darker and scarier than anything we imagine. In this video, we're diving into 3 terrifying true stories that happened on Halloween, proving that not all horror stories are make-believe. From a chillingly realistic decoration, mistaken for a Halloween prank, to an intruder at a costume party with deadly intentions, these real-life events will make you think twice about what you see on Halloween night. So grab a seat, turn down the lights, and prepare yourself for some real-life Halloween horror. On October 31st, 1974, in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Deer Park, Texas, excitement filled the air as children dressed in costumes roamed from door to door, trick-or-treating in exchange for candy and other treats. The night was alive with laughter and joy, parents happily accompanying their children on the spooky holiday ritual. Among them was Ronald O'Brien, a church-going optician who was out with his 2 young children, 8-year-old Timothy and 5-year-old Elizabeth. Dressed in costumes, they joined friends to go door to door collecting candy. Halloween that year felt just as magical as any other, but it would end in unimaginable tragedy. Ronald's family, like many others, was looking forward to their Halloween haul of sweets. It was a chilly evening, and they had covered a good part of the neighborhood before ending up on a dark, unlit porch of one house. After knocking and waiting for what felt like an unusually long time, Ronald turned to leave with the children. But just as they were walking away, the door opened, and a hand emerged, handing Ronald a handful of pixie sticks. The treat seemed like a lucky find, an unexpected addition to their candy bags. After they'd finished collecting candy, Ronald, Timothy, and Elizabeth returned home, tired but pleased with their Halloween stash. Like most parents, Ronald went through his children's candy, examining each piece before allowing them to eat anything. He acted with concern, even choosing a few pieces of candy himself to test for safety. Timothy was eyeing the large pixie sticks he had received, the powdered sugar-like candy inside tempting him. His father seemed encouraging and helped him open the tube, carefully watching as Timothy took a mouthful of the sugary powder. But immediately, Timothy recoiled, saying that the candy tasted bitter. Ronald brought him a glass of Kool-Aid to wash down the taste, and Timothy reluctantly finished the pixie sticks. Moments later, he began to clutch his stomach in pain. Timothy's face twisted in agony, and within minutes he was vomiting uncontrollably. His symptoms quickly escalated, and he began convulsing. His mother, Danine, and Ronald watched in horror as their son's body writhed in pain. Ronald carried Timothy in his arms, rushing him to the nearest hospital, but it was too late. Shortly after arriving, Timothy was pronounced dead. His parents' worst nightmare had come true. At first, it appeared to be an accidental poisoning, perhaps a terrible mishap with the candy, or so everyone thought. But after a closer investigation, the pixie sticks Timothy had consumed tested positive for cyanide, an extremely lethal poison, even in small amounts. The dosage in the candy tube was so high that it could have killed multiple adults, let alone a small child. The community was in shock, fearing that someone was distributing poisoned candy to children. Police immediately warned other parents to check their children's treats, and many families brought in their Halloween hauls to have them tested. The O'Brien family's neighborhood turned from a peaceful community into a terrified one, with parents fearful of even touching the treats their kids had collected. As investigators interviewed Ronald, his story began to unravel. He had made remarks about the strange house where he'd received the pixie sticks, describing the shadowy figure who handed them over. But the homeowner was quickly ruled out, as he had a rock-solid alibi, and other residents verified that they'd seen no one at that home all night. The focus shifted back to Ronald, who police soon learned had recently taken out a series of life insurance policies on his 2 children, policies that would pay him a substantial sum in the event of their deaths. In the weeks before Halloween, Ronald had added an additional $20,000 to each policy and reportedly had been inquiring about cashing out insurance shortly after Timothy's death. Investigators also discovered that he was severely in debt, facing a mountain of financial difficulties that he'd concealed from his family. His coworkers revealed that Ronald had been speaking about various ways to get out of his financial crisis, including through investments in insurance. Ronald's attempts to cover his tracks were chillingly calculated. He had reportedly tried to hand out pixie sticks to other children that night, possibly to divert suspicion from himself by making it appear as if a stranger had targeted kids in the neighborhood. Luckily, the other children had either refused or hadn't consumed the deadly treat. When police confronted Ronald with the evidence, he continued to deny involvement, maintaining his innocence. But the mounting evidence and his financial motives were impossible to ignore. He was eventually arrested and charged with the murder of his son, Timothy. The media gave him the name the Candyman and the Man Who Killed Halloween, a chilling title that reflected the horror of his crime. The trial was a national sensation, with parents everywhere on edge and horrified by the notion that a parent could commit such an unthinkable act. Ronald O'Brien was found guilty and sentenced to death in 1975. He spent nearly a decade on death row, continuing to profess his innocence until he was executed by lethal injection in 1984. His execution was witnessed by a crowd of people outside the prison who shouted, "Trick or treat," as he took his last breath. In the years that followed, this horrifying story became a permanent part of Halloween folklore, forever changing the way people approached the holiday. Parents began meticulously inspecting their children's candy, fearful of what might lurk inside. Halloween was no longer seen as an entirely innocent celebration, but a reminder of how the holiday had been stained by one man's greed and monstrous betrayal. To this day, Ronald O'Brien's crime stands as a warning, a tragic, true story that reveals just how dark human nature can be, even on a night dedicated to harmless frights and fun. The Candyman transformed Halloween forever, and his story remains a haunting reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones wearing masks, they're the people we trust the most. The Halloween season brings an air of mystery and excitement to nearly every town across the United States, as people pull out all the stops to turn their homes into scenes of eerie intrigue. In the small town of Frederica, Delaware, this was no different. Residents took pride in their Halloween decorations, filling their lawns with all sorts of spooky ornaments. Glowing jack-o'-lanterns, eerie graveyard setups, and elaborate displays of ghosts and skeletons hanging from trees and porches. But on Halloween morning in 2005, a particular decoration caught the attention of many passers-by on a busy neighborhood street. Suspended from a sturdy tree branch was a figure that, at a glance, seemed to be part of an impressively realistic Halloween display. The figure, dressed in dark clothing, appeared to be a life-size mannequin hanging from a rope, gently swaying in the cool morning breeze. The scene had an unsettling authenticity to it, almost too lifelike, yet most people brushed it off as a well-done Halloween prop. Cars slowed down as people took in the scene, some admiring it with a mix of curiosity and a little nervous laughter. Others, particularly the neighborhood's children, marveled at how realistic it looked. Some of them even dared each other to go closer, just to see if it was as frightening up close as it seemed from the sidewalk. Throughout the morning, people stopped to observe the figure, chuckling or shivering slightly at the sight. A few neighbors even commented on how detailed it looked, and some remarked that it was just a bit too real for comfort. But Halloween was known for its spooky surprises, so most dismissed the nagging feeling of discomfort that tugged at them as they continued on with their day. As the hours passed and the sun rose higher in the sky, more and more people walked by the scene, some on their way to work, others taking a morning jog or walking their dogs. Those who saw it assumed that someone in the neighborhood had simply gone all out with their Halloween decorations that year. The grim figure became a sort of morbid attraction for the neighborhood. As it hung there in plain sight, passers-by continued to talk and laugh about how unsettling it was. Children on their way to school passed by, pointing and whispering to each other, sharing nervous giggles. However, as the morning stretched into the early afternoon, a growing sense of discomfort began to settle over a few observant residents. Some began to question the decoration's disturbingly realistic details. Why had no one seen anyone putting up the figure? Why did it hang so still and so grimly in a way that seemed different from the other Halloween decorations? The longer it remained there, the more disturbing it seemed. It wasn't until later that afternoon that someone finally decided to investigate more closely. Approaching the figure, a neighbor gasped in horror upon realizing the unsettling truth. This wasn't a Halloween decoration. It was the body of a woman, a 42-year-old who had died by suicide. Shocked and shaken, the neighbor quickly called the police to report the discovery. When authorities arrived, they cordoned off the area and began the difficult task of removing the woman's body from the tree. The once lighthearted atmosphere surrounding the decoration quickly turned to one of horror and sorrow as neighbors realized what they had unknowingly passed by all day. Many were shaken by the tragic reality of the situation. They had admired and even laughed at what they thought was a clever Halloween decoration, not realizing they were witnessing a very real tragedy. As news of the incident spread, the community was gripped by a haunting sense of guilt and grief. Halloween, usually a time of harmless scares and thrills, now carried a tragic memory for the residents of Frederica. Parents struggled with how to explain the situation to their children, many of whom had seen the body and believed it to be a cool decoration. The horror of what had actually transpired weighed heavily on the neighborhood, as the innocent joys of Halloween were replaced by a somber reminder of the hidden struggles that people around us might face. In the days that followed, neighbors gathered in small groups, discussing the haunting experience and the woman's untimely death. They shared stories about the strange and dark turn Halloween had taken that year, and the impact it had on the community's sense of safety and trust. Many began to reflect on how often people suffer in silence, their pain unnoticed or misunderstood by those around them. The image of the hanging figure stayed with them, a tragic reminder that the masks we wear on Halloween sometimes hide deeper, more profound pains. What seemed like a harmless, lifelike decoration on a festive holiday was in fact a cry for help that had gone unnoticed until it was too late. The story of the Halloween hanging became a cautionary tale within the town, a reminder of the importance of paying attention to those around us, not just in times of celebration, but every day. It haunted the town's memories long after Halloween had passed, a painful reminder of how sometimes, in our eagerness to embrace the thrills and chills of Halloween, we can overlook the very real struggles happening in plain sight. Halloween night in 2016 was buzzing with excitement in San Antonio, Texas. Friends and strangers alike gathered to celebrate the season's spooky festivities, many hosting or attending parties throughout the city. In one bustling neighborhood, a group of friends decided to go all out, transforming their house into a haunted wonderland with flickering lights, eerie decorations, and costumed revelers filling the rooms and backyard. From the outside, the house looked like the epicenter of Halloween excitement, music pulsing from within as costumed figures danced and laughed. Inside, the party was in full swing, and everyone was enjoying themselves. People dressed as everything from superheroes to classic monsters mingled, sipped drinks, and took photos. The environment was relaxed, the perfect blend of festive and spooky, where friends could laugh and enjoy harmless Halloween scares. Among the partygoers was a young woman named Sarah, a vibrant 23-year-old with a wide circle of friends. She was dressed as a fairy, her costume complete with delicate wings and glittering makeup that sparkled under the lights. Sarah was surrounded by friends, enjoying the night and posing for photos, unaware of the nightmare that was about to unfold. Amidst the costumes and masks, a man entered the party, dressed in a nondescript Halloween outfit and wearing a mask that obscured his face. It wasn't unusual for strangers to show up at these large Halloween gatherings, especially since friends would often invite other friends, and everyone was masked. No one thought twice about the man wandering from room to room, examining the decorations and watching the guests. Many assumed he was just another partygoer enjoying the Halloween vibe. As he made his way through the crowd, the man's gaze locked onto Sarah. She was laughing with friends, seemingly unaware of the figure watching her from across the room. Slowly, he made his way toward her, his demeanor blending in with the party's chaos. People continued to laugh and dance around him, the atmosphere so lively that no one paid much attention to his presence. Then, without warning, the man reached into his jacket, pulled out a gun, and fired multiple shots at Sarah. A loud bang echoed through the room, followed by another, then another. Sarah's laughter turned to a scream as she collapsed, hit multiple times by gunfire. In an instant, the party turned from festive to chaotic as the music screeched to a halt and guests frantically scattered, unsure if this was part of a Halloween prank or something much worse. For a few seconds, many people stood frozen, too shocked to process what had just happened. After all, it was Halloween night, and at first, some partygoers assumed it might be a prank or some kind of skit meant to scare them. But the blood pooling around Sarah and the terror on her face told a different story. Guests began screaming, some rushing toward her, while others ran for the exits, unsure if the masked gunman would target more people. As the panic spread, the shooter quickly fled the scene, disappearing into the night before anyone could react or stop him. The once lively Halloween party was left in stunned silence, the realization of what had just occurred sinking in among the guests. The police arrived within minutes, alerted by multiple frantic 911 calls from horrified witnesses who described the shooter's mask and costume. Sarah was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, fighting for her life as her friends and family waited anxiously, horrified by the violence that had shattered an innocent Halloween celebration. As investigators spoke to partygoers and pieced together the night's events, a chilling truth emerged. The shooter was no stranger to Sarah. He was, in fact, her ex-boyfriend, someone she had broken up with months before. Though their relationship had ended, he had refused to accept it, his jealousy and anger simmering beneath the surface. According to friends, Sarah had distanced herself from him, hoping to move on with her life. But her ex-boyfriend had been watching her from afar, growing increasingly resentful. When he learned of the Halloween party, he saw it as an opportunity to confront her, hiding behind a costume and mask to blend into the crowd. The news sent waves of fear through the community. Friends, family, and even strangers struggled to comprehend the senseless violence that had transformed a night of fun into a nightmare. The realization that the shooter had blended in so easily with the other guests left a haunting impression, highlighting how difficult it can be to distinguish between harmless Halloween revelry and real danger. In the days that followed, the story spread, a terrifying reminder of the dark reality hiding behind some masks. Friends who had been at the party were left traumatized, haunted by the memory of that night and the realization that the shooter had been among them, plotting and waiting for his moment. Sarah miraculously survived, though her recovery was long and painful, both physically and emotionally. Her experience left a permanent scar, a tragic reminder of how quickly life can change in a single, horrifying moment. Halloween, once her favorite holiday, became a date she associated with terror and betrayal. The story of the Halloween intruder continues to serve as a sobering reminder of the thin line between real and imagined threats, especially on a holiday where masks and costumes conceal the people behind them. It stands as a chilling example of how, amidst the laughter and joy of Halloween, real dangers can lurk unseen, waiting for an opportunity to strike.